Google may have started out as a simple search engine, but today with applications like Android, Chrome, Wave, Picasa, Google Apps, YouTube, and Google Ocean, and now even its own smartphone, it's become an internet powerhouse. This technological tsunami pours forth almost daily from its development teams located around the world. In the process, Google has become a global vacuum cleaner of digital data. It handles an estimated 20 petabytes of data every day. That's the equivalent of 130 billion photographs or 5 billion songs on an iPod. It also deals with more than 1 billion searches per day, and those searches leave a digital footprint of every person visiting the site.
Do you know what this might be? Does anybody know what that is?
Google founders Sergey Brin and Larry Page.
Wow, okay. I didn't really realize what it was when I first saw it, but this is what helped me see it. This is what we run at the office that actually runs real time, and every one of those rising dots represents probably about 20, 30 searches.
Their ultimate goal is to make Google into an all-knowing entity.
So this session is supposed to be about the future. So I thought I'd talk at least briefly about it. And to do the perfect job doing search, you really have to be smart. In fact, the ultimate search engine would be artificial intelligence. And so that's something we work on.
If I ruled the world, every day would be the first day of spring.
In just over 10 years, Google has become one of Silicon Valley's biggest and most unconventional players. In that time, it's cultivated an image of a large but benign presence. That public perception is changing. When Google began to scan and digitize millions of books, authors and publishers responded not with hurrahs, but lawsuits alleging copyright infringement. Not long after Google News was launched, Google became the target of condemnation by the print media, which accused it of destroying their ad business and being responsible for plummeting circulation revenues. Or with Google's YouTube site, the music and television industries see a threatening competitor undermining their traditional methods of making money. And when Google started photographing streets, it outraged privacy advocates. Wherever or whatever Google expands into, it always seems to be accompanied by disruption and upheaval. And whenever controversy does arise, Google falls back on a corporate motto that was born out of an early Google employee's aversion to corporate speak. The search engine Google was born in that hotbed of technological innovation, the computer science department at Stanford University. Larry Page and Sergey Brin met as grad students in 1995. They had much in common. Their fathers were both college profs, and their mothers were scientists. Both were born in 1973. Both grew up with and loved anything to do with computers. They created their earliest search engine from off-the-shelf computer components, some of which they begged and borrowed from the university, and after they maxed out their personal credit cards, they came up with some ingenious solutions to their limited finances.
And then Larry discovered that he could get a better deal by buying the individual discs without the cases, and they built their own machine, and they got more storage for the same amount of money.
With a structure made of toy building blocks and their secret algorithm sauce, which they called Backrub, they cobbled together a revolutionary new search engine. In the mid-1990s, AltaVista, like the majority of other search engines, looked only at text, ranking the results based on the number of times a keyword appeared. Larry and Sergey's search engine was far more sophisticated, with a mathematical algorithm that looked at the number of links to and from internet sites. The more links, the higher the rank. Larry and Sergey were preparing to leave Stanford to start up their search engine company, which by this time they registered as Google, a misspelling of a mathematical term for one with 100 zeros after it. Meanwhile, they continued to participate in the computer science program. The three Stanford postgrad students opened up corporate headquarters in that cliché of Silicon Valley, a garage. The company began to expand.
I joined in January of 1999, which was a few months after they had started. There were 4 other people at the company, including Larry and Sergey at the time. And they were renting half a house from someone who was still living there and who is now a vice president at Google. And the computers, everybody was working in offices or in bedrooms, if you will. And the garage was included, and I believe we had a printer there, we had a ping pong table there. But the whole company was not living in the garage.
As Google outgrew its garage, it moved corporate headquarters into a regular office space in downtown Palo Alto.
We were in Palo Alto back in those days, which is like a restaurant town. My goal was that we would go to a different restaurant every night. We'd eat out dinner all the time. We'd eat out lunch all the time, in fact.
The company was expanding quickly, and soon they moved again. But with few restaurants around this new location, Larry and Sergey decided that it would be more efficient and more cost-effective if they had their own kitchen with their own chef. The one who was chosen had on his resume a stint cooking for the band, the Grateful Dead.
They offered me shares in the very beginning, and I was very reluctant. I talked to my dad about it, and I was like, Pop, these guys want me to give them money for these shares in a company that isn't public. And he's like, it's a scam. Don't believe them. Don't you give them a dime.
Unlike other search sites, the Google homepage was clean and efficient, free of annoying banner ads and pop-ups. Larry Page and Sergey Brin watched as their search engine Google became more and more popular. But that engine still wasn't translating into real money, and they had no viable business plan to make Google turn a profit.
Our founders decided that for the longest time that we weren't going to get into the ad business. However, I think the breakthrough idea came when we said, look, why don't we just show ads that are purely text-based and doesn't have any, moving images or distracting stuff.
Based on the search, Google would provide simple ads for people to click through. So in October 2000, Google embarked on a new business, online advertising. Almost immediately, ad money started to flood in, and pressure grew on Larry and Sergey from their venture capitalist investors. They wanted an experienced CEO to run the place. Larry and Sergey chose a seasoned veteran of the tech world, Eric Schmidt. He had successfully run software maker Novell, and before that, he was with Sun Microsystems. But perhaps what was more important for the founders was that he shared with them a background as a computer science engineer, married to a strong entrepreneurial drive. Employee number 23, Paul Buckheit, who was the originator of the motto, "Don't be evil," was also the engineer who in just one day came up with Gmail, an email program used internally by Googlers.
There were a lot of objections to even doing Gmail in the first place, but one of the big ones was that there was no way to make money with email. So there was this idea that had been floating around that maybe we could do targeted advertising. For example, if you get an email about a ski trip, you'll get maybe an advertisement for ski equipment or gloves or something like that.
He decided to try writing some code to see if it was possible for Google computers to scan the Gmail messages and spit out an appropriate ad.
When I arrived the next day, people were pretty excited about it, and not always in a positive way. Some people thought that it was actually a terrible idea.
The addition of targeted ads to Gmail in 2004 proved to be no joke, adding to Google's ever-burgeoning bottom line. Google had transformed itself into an advertising money-making machine.
Now, when we talk about publicity, the Google IPO has received more publicity than any other IPO in history.
When Google was preparing for its initial public offering of stock, it had to disclose a closely guarded secret, that it had staggeringly large revenues and profits. It took most investment observers by surprise and made Google a very attractive stock to own. And so August 19th, 2004, the first day of trading of Google shares, saw the creation of hundreds of freshly minted millionaires. Those early investors and first Google employees had struck the mother lode. Larry and Sergey were now way beyond wealthy. It took just 6 years for them to become billionaires. Their company, Google, had become one of the world's top search engines. It's even made it into dictionaries as a verb. Google as a technological tool has become part of pop culture. And young people's perception of Google as a cross between a college dorm and geek heaven means that Google receives more than 1 million job applications a year. The Googleplex, as it is known by the Googlers who inhabit it, are made to feel that they are the best and brightest, deserving of the complimentary meals, the subsidized masseuse service, the free laundry, as well as the barbershop on wheels. Google receives more than 1 million job applications a year. However, to join the ranks of some 20,000 worldwide Googlers requires passage through a grueling series of tests and interviews. Rajin Seth, another Stanford computer science graduate, had worked at a number of high-tech companies before approaching Google.
I probably went through somewhere between 10 to 15 interviews at the time. And then finally, my last interview was with Larry. And so, you know, literally I just came in one day and actually got to sit down in Larry Page's office and interview with him. And he asked me a bunch of tough questions, and I didn't quite know how I did, but apparently he liked me enough to the point where they decided to give me an offer.
Among the most highly prized employees at Google, just after computer science engineers, are new hires called APMs, or Associate Product Managers. Although Google might be highly transparent internally, it, like so many of the other big Silicon Valley high-tech companies, is extremely sensitive about what outsiders are allowed to report on, whether that be code on monitor screens or the doodles on the whiteboards, which are seemingly everywhere.
We believe in having whiteboards all over the place, and the reason for that is to really spur creativity, so that, you know, you can draw things and communicate ideas and work with other people on that idea.
The secure data connector here, right? Is our ability to publish programmatically going to be released at the same time, or is that?
Yeah. And so a lot of times people will pull out their phone and take a picture of the whiteboard and send that around as an email. You know, those end up being part of the notes for the meeting.
Besides having whiteboards and food stands everywhere, the other striking feature about Google offices is the absence of paper.
We operate very much in a paperless manner. You know, one of the things that we've done here at Google is that users have laptops that they carry with them to the meetings that they're in. A lot of the note-taking is done electronically so that it can be instantly shared with people.
An insatiable appetite for the new and innovative, spanning a wide spectrum of technologies, means Google is constantly on the prowl. With plenty of cash and stock at its disposal, Google is able to scoop up companies it's interested in. That's how YouTube became a Google product, as did Google Earth and Picasa, as well as a web-based word processing program called Writely.
Writely was a word processor in the browser. You just go to it as a normal website and it just works. Google noticed it because we were, you know, getting a little bit of press.
Writely has morphed into Google Docs, a word processor that moves the application and its data from the personal desktop computer to Google's servers. For computer geeks, the fun really began in 1977 in a Silicon Valley garage when two college dropouts started a company called Apple and launched a revolution, the personal computer revolution. The power of the desktop computer unleashed across millions of homes and offices around the world changed everything. But now, after more than a quarter of a century of insinuating itself into our lives, the PC has lost pretty well all of its original gee-whiz luster. Google has set its sights on creating another revolution by eliminating the need for desktop computers. It wants to put as much of that data as possible onto its own servers. From its beginnings, Google had made it a priority to manufacture as cheaply as possible all its servers and storage facilities to handle its fast search and logging of the internet. And as the internet has grown, so has the need for increased computing capacity.
Well, Google builds large data centers. We use personal computer components, and then we build a lot of specialized systems now to deal with the kind of scale that is required.
Scale is at the heart of Google. Not only does Google have access to almost limitless computer power, but perhaps of greater value, it has accumulated a massive collection of data. Data that can be used for testing at a scale unseen by most new computer engineers. That shocking 4 petabytes is the equivalent of 4 million gigabytes, numbers so staggeringly large that it is nearly impossible for mere mortals to fathom. As memory increases in capacity and decreases in price, Google is moving into something called cloud computing.
The whole idea behind cloud computing is to go ahead and get everything on their server where the professionals are managing it. The problem today is you've got all your stuff on your computer, you drop it, you break it, you delete it, it's a disaster. Why don't you put everything that's important somewhere else, keep it secure, keep it under your control, it's available to you on every demand, on every device, and everywhere you are.
Is this move into the clouds opening a back door for governments and corporations to secretly access data about us? If everyone's digital data is moving into computer clouds, just where are these clouds? One of them has touched down in the foothills of the Blue Ridge Mountains in North Carolina. This was once the heartland of American furniture manufacturing. Then in the 1990s, cheap labor from overseas siphoned off the jobs, leaving behind a devastated economy and an awful lot of excess electricity. It just so happens that computer data centers are voracious users of electricity to run the servers and to cool vast quantities of water used for refrigeration. The town of Lenore had plenty of both, and so in late 2005, Google came calling, but it came cloaked in secrecy. From these digital warehouses estimated to cost $600 million apiece flows a stream of data. Here are the emails, the photographs, the music, the videos, the maps, and the searches that have made Google a data collecting powerhouse. Google does not divulge how many server farms it runs worldwide, but it is rumored that there are some 3 dozen of them around the globe, all digitally connected and all firmly planted on land. But that might change. Google has filed a patent to build data centers out on the open sea. Powered by the latest technologies in harnessing wave energy, Google servers would sit out on barges. The expectation is that sea-bound servers would be much cheaper to run, and there certainly wouldn't be any real estate or property taxes to pay. A working model has yet to be built, but Google is a corporation that likes to move quickly when cutting-edge technology is involved. With almost 20,000 employees worldwide, Google is beginning to see some of its early hires leaving for what they see as the next big thing. In a down-market district of San Francisco, an internet startup has an abundance of Google corporate DNA. Several of its founders are ex-Googlers. But their company, Aardvark, wants to go beyond Google and transform search itself. Just down the highway, in a nondescript industrial mall in Silicon Valley, there is another social network startup with its own list of very impressive ex-Googlers, including Paul Buchheit, who so famously, or perhaps infamously, coined Google's motto, "Don't be evil." Their tiny company called FriendFeed is developing a new social network service that shares and keeps track of what friends are listening to, reading, and posting on the web.
None of us really knows what's going to happen next. But in many ways, I find that that's actually part of the fun of a startup. At a big company, I can pretty easily predict what's going to happen next year. At a startup, you have no idea what's going to happen next. Next year could be a huge success or it could be a huge failure.
Google had been eyeing FriendFeed for possible acquisition. But before FriendFeed could even reach its second year in business, it was gobbled up by social network phenomenon Facebook for a reported $50 million. Facebook, founded by a Harvard dropout in 2004, has undergone an explosive growth and represents a real challenge to Google, at the same time attracting a surprising number of ex-Googlers. Facebook, along with Twitter, are currently the hottest social networks around, and they have realized that their kind of friend-based recommendations is a form of search far removed from Google's cold, calculating algorithms.
For most people, outside of engineering, the world is about relationships. It's about connecting with other people. And to that extent, Facebook really is that next step in the evolution of what really matters from a technology perspective.
Google had in fact entered the social network market with something called Orkut. Although tremendously popular in India and South America, it has failed to attract any large following among Europeans and North Americans.
Google really didn't jump into the social networking business, and I think that's partly the personality of the founders. I think they're engineers who, small talk with your friends is not the priority. It's getting information from the scientific world is priority. So I think in some sense there was always a bias that this was sort of not very interesting, not very important. Why would you want to spend time on it? And of course, as the world has moved to Facebook and Twitter and all those things, they've said, oh, we can do that technically too. Sure, we can put Twitter-like things into Gmail. We can put Facebook-like things. We have Orkut. But I think the heart of the company isn't in it. It's not what the company's about. It's about information, all the world's information.
Google really believes that the data is going to create incredible benefit for society. The company firmly believes that it's going to find ways to use data to make our lives better, to make our lives easier, to make decisions more efficient. They firmly believe that. For instance, with flu trends, they believe that in tracking individual searches for looking for things like cough or other medical conditions, they are going to detect the flu, they are going to be able to more effectively target interventions, and fewer people will die.
When Google launched its IPO, Larry and Sergey personally wrote a letter explaining their aspiration for its future. Google is not a conventional company, they wrote. We do not intend to become one. Google's mission to collect all the world's information and make it accessible and useful, and do it within 300 years, has seen it move far beyond searching internet sites. Whether photographing streets, or digitizing the world's books, or turning our mobile devices into internet portals, or creating the world's greatest repository of video in its very own cloud, Google remains a technological phenomenon. But its future rests on something quite unscientific. Trust. Trust that it is keeping our data safe from hackers and snooping governments. Trust that it isn't misusing our information. And ultimately trust that Google is living up to its motto, don't be evil.